When it comes to EV crossovers with a third row, the market is very slim right now. But here for the 2024 model year, Kia has introduced the EV9, and expectations are high considering how good the EV6 is, as well as the Kia Telluride. As always, I'm going to go through this thing from the outside in, talk about what it's been like to live with for the past week. Let's go ahead, take a look. So quite a few people are going to have sticker shock looking at the price of this thing. The EV9 starts at 55 grand, goes all the way up to just under 80 here in the GT line. That is pretty spendy here, but if you look across the market, this is the cheapest three-row EV that you can buy that actually has room for humans with legs in the back seat. You can technically get a Mercedes EQB that will have 3 rows, but the back rows are very, very tight in that. This one actually has usable back seats. It's going to be cheaper than a Rivian R1S. It's going to be cheaper than a Model X. It's going to be cheaper than an EQS. So the price is about right for this segment. And hopefully come 2025, you're going to get the full tax refund too. This particular one here was built in South Korea, so it doesn't qualify, but Kia is spending quite a bit of money along with Hyundai down in their plant in Georgia so that they can start building these here in America. They're expecting to start building these in Q2 here in 2024 in the US, and then they're going to build a battery facility down there as well, which means by 2025, you should be able to get the full tax credit, hopefully. Last time I drove an EV, I said there ought to be a button to open the frunk. There's always a button to open the trunk hatch, so why not a button to open the frunk? And well, Kia's done that here. There's a button right there on the key. Pop this nut open, and you do have a little bit of space here, not a ton. We're looking at 1.8 cubic feet of space here in the all-wheel drive version. If you have a little less running gear, if you get the rear-wheel drive version, then you end up with 3.2 cubic feet of space. You could fit a backpack, you can fit your charging cable and maybe a couple other things in here. It is small, but it is actually a usable space here. And since I'm a creature of habit, we'll talk about the powertrain while we're in here. We're looking at 516 pound-feet of torque, 379 horsepower here in the GT line. If you drop down into like the base trims, you're closer to 200 horsepower. If you go into the other all-wheel drive versions of this car, then you get 443 pound-feet of torque and still that 379 horsepower. 443 is plenty. I don't know who needs more than that in their three-row crossover, but if you decide that you want an all-wheel drive version that's not the GT line, you can actually option the extra torque, which is still weird to me, but it's all software, so you can just option that extra bump and get the land trim or the wind trim and bump it up to 516 pound-feet of torque. As for charging, this thing has the port on the passenger side in the back, so you do have to get used to backing into spots, backing into a garage, get to learn a new skill if you're not good at that one yet. But this thing will charge from 10 to 80% in about 24 minutes if you can find a 350 fast charger. So good news there that it accepts a 350. This thing will, it's like 4 days if you're on a level 1. I've been charging on a level 1 just to sort of get me by, and I could probably get through the week with my 30-ish mile commute just using that level 1 charger. A level 2 is going to be just under 9 hours here, but if you're going on a road trip or something, 24 minutes is really pretty good here. Especially, you think about this as a family hauler, you go on a family road trip, you get the kids out, go to the bathroom, get food, whatever, you come back out and it's already been about 20 minutes at that point. And 270 miles of range on this thing. You're probably only going about 250 miles anyway if you are taking the kids around. If you're on a family road trip, I don't know whose kids can hold it for longer than 200 miles, but 300 miles of range if you go into the rear wheel drive with the long range. Now, the other thing with the GT line is that it gets you the vehicle to load and the onboard generator. So you can use that onboard generator down to about 20% battery life on the car, and you can basically power your appliances. If you're going camping or something, you can power everything off of this car. Size-wise, we're pretty solidly in the mid-size crossover segment here. A little bit shorter than a Tesla Model X, a little bit shorter than a Rivian R1S. Actually, a tiny bit longer than the Telluride, but narrower and lower, especially if you get the rear-wheel drive version. That one's going to be quite a bit lower than the Telluride. And our center of gravity is a lot lower as well because we have those batteries across the bottom instead of having the engine up in the front raised up a little bit. But that is all good news because that will help with the driving dynamics a little bit, unless you, of course, you are going off-road with this thing and you need the extra ground clearance. But the narrowness especially does help quite a bit, especially up here in New England where our garages are maybe a little bit smaller than a lot of the country. You know, with the Telluride, if it didn't fit, you can park that outside. Not ideal, but not the end of the world. With this, if you can't get it into the garage, that means you're probably also not charging it unless you have an outdoor charger. But most people are probably wanting to charge this inside of the garage. So I have been able to fit it in. It is a little bit tight, but that narrowness does definitely help quite a bit. Now we've got this nice long 122-inch wheelbase. Again, that's going to help with the planniness, going to help with the ride quality here. We've got these door handles. Everybody's trying to solve this problem. I did not know that was a problem that needed to be solved. I get that maybe it helps security wise. It definitely helps make it a little bit sleeker, makes it look a little bit nicer in terms of just not having anything protruding out while the car is locked. But it is not my favorite. Although I do at least wish that they would have the lock unlock on the back, especially in a big 3-row like this. You're probably putting kids in the back. You're probably going to the back door before you're going to the front door. And as you can see, we do also have the power folding mirrors. That's actually going to be standard. It doesn't even matter if you get the top trim like I have here, or if you get the base light trim. And you get the LED turn signals in here. This blind spot camera is only on the top 2 specs, and that's going to also help tap into the 360 view, but that's going to be a blind spot camera for when you hit your turn signals. I will talk about that a little bit more during the drive. And then the auto dimming feature on these mirrors is only if you are in the top 2 specs. A lot of this gloss black, the gloss black roof rails, the gloss black trim all around the windows, gloss black down here with the dark silver. That's all going to be part of the GT line styling package here. So if you're in one of the other trim levels, it's going to look a little bit different. These wheels here, these are the 22s. These are the biggest wheels you can get on this. They're going to be standard on the GT line. The base level, the light trim is going to get you 19s. If you bump up to the wind, you're also going to be on 19s. If you go into the land trim level, then you're going to be on 20s. And then the GT line gets you the 21s. I would rather see the smaller wheels. As always, you get a little bit more sidewall, a little bit better ride quality. These do have some pretty massive sidewall to them. These are going to be all seasons, and they're going to be the sort of EV specific all seasons. These wheels, all these EVs are doing these like fully filled in thing with the wheels. A little futuristic look to those. Front end here, nice and clean, not even any real contour through the hood, just nice and clean through here. We got a lot of this gloss black again because this is the GT line. It's going to look a little bit different in the other trim levels. Got full LED projector style LED headlights here, LED daytime running lights as well. Those are going to be standard, does not matter what trim level you're in. Got this light signature throughout here. You can adjust, make little patterns through there. That's only in the GT line, and it's optional if you get the land trim the second from the top. Not really sure how that's useful functionally, but it's kind of interesting and fun, I guess. I like the lights down through here as well for the turn signals. That's a pretty cool little touch. We got parking sensors across the front as well as the front camera for the collision avoidance. Standard as well, does not matter what trim level you're in, so that's a nice touch there. We got the active arrow going on down here. Let me see if I can get this thing to, we got the remote start right on the key here. Just lock it up, hold that down. Let me see if I can get this thing to wave at you. For the back end here, again, I love this light design. We got the full LED taillights going on. Got the brake light going on across there. Nice and simple and clean with just the blue and the black. Again, the gloss black because of the GT line here. Got parking sensors across the back, as well as a rear view camera that's going to be standard, with the rear collision avoidance working in tandem with the rear collision avoidance, standard across the board. So nice features there. You're also going to get the camera feed through the inside mirror. We'll talk about that when we get to the interior portion. This also has a smart open feature for the hatch, where you just stand behind it with your key, stand there for a couple seconds, and it'll open right up. If you want it to close, just walk away, or you can use the key functions here. Got quite a few nice key functions on here, but if you just hold down, of course, you do have a hatch button there. Now we'll open right up into about hatchback levels of space back here. It is a little bit tight. It is oftentimes with 3 rows, especially the mid-size crossover 3 rows, but you can drop the third row down, of course. And if you want to drop the second row down, have buttons off to the side here. Also have a regular outlet off to the side there. You got a 12 volt over here, and you've got a button to open and close the hatch from there. And underneath here, you just have a couple of tools down there and a fix-a-flat kit. Unfortunately, no spare tire in this one. And like I said, you can walk away, or you can use the button there or the button on your key to close it up. The third row isn't exactly suburban levels of spacious, but it does have plenty of room if you are on the shorter side. I'm 5'7". I have no problems fitting back here. You could probably even go up to maybe 5'10", 5'11", especially since these seats are power adjustable. So you just shove the seat up a little bit. They still have a little bit of room here, and I have room back here. I wouldn't want to be back here for long periods of time, but it's much better than a lot of the 3 rows. Now note, this is only 2 seats back here. There are only 2 seats because this is a little bit narrower than the Telluride. You can option 3 across in the middle, but you only get 2 in the back. But each of these does have the ISOFIX child latches, and it has an anchor on the back, so you can put child seats in any of these 4 seats. You also have a 3-point seat belt in every seat, so every one of them is going to come over the shoulder. We've even got some USB-Cs back here. We got some cup holders back here. A little bit sparse, but not uncomfortable. The second row here is actually quite a nice place to be. These seats are power adjustable, which means that even if I wasn't 5'7", I would have plenty of legroom here. I could just move it all the way back, and if I was 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", I'd probably still have plenty of legroom here. Headroom might be a little bit on the tight side if I was all torso, but at least you got the nice headliner here because we're in the top spec. Got a little reading light over here. We do have heat and ventilation in the upper specs here. That is not standard. If you've got child seats back here like I do, then it's not going to be the end of the world because they can't use it anyway. But if you have passengers sitting back here for long periods of time, might be a nice little touch there. We have the privacy screen here in the second row as well, which I always fumble with, which is nice if you want to take a little nap, especially since these have the relaxation seats option. So you can just tilt this all the way back, put this back, and put the legs up, though my feet get caught in the seat in front of me if I put the legs up. So not exactly the most space here for the legs. Wouldn't really use that too much. Wouldn't necessarily get the relaxation seats here. But nice that you can lean it way back, take a little nap, though the person behind you is not going to appreciate that very much. But we also have some vents here. We got USB-Cs over here. We do have a cup holders. We've got a little drawer here with some extra storage space down there. And then we've got the USB-Cs over here. We do have HVAC that we can control for ourselves here in the second row. If you have kids here that can't reach that, and you probably don't want reaching that and playing with it anyway, then you can control that from the front as well. If you have an adult back here, then they can control the HVAC for themselves. So really a nice place to be in the second row here. inside the EV9, it is tough to swallow the $80,000 price point here in the GT trim level. There are some nice materials here. I mean, you do have the Syntex, the synthetic leather all over the place, the seats, the steering wheel, you have some cloth. You know, most of the touch points are nice. But you have these plastic buttons through here, this like protruding hard plastic stuff. And this is, you know, all this plastic with the sort of rattly cup holders here. It just doesn't feel like a luxury level car. It's not meant to be a luxury level car. It is still a Kia. They don't have like a Genesis counterpart. But if you're spending $80,000 on something, you do expect it to be a little more luxe here. But at the same time, you know, with an EV, a lot of that money does go towards the powertrain versus going towards the interior. And all that being said, the features in here are very nice. It's still very comfortable. And a lot of the features here are actually standard across the board. So I think this car makes a lot more sense at like the $55,000, $60,000 price range in the lower trims, wouldn't necessarily jump up to the GT. I think that's a lot easier to swallow for the interior here. Now, there are some extra features here. We'll go through what the features are. So, you know, maybe those are worth it to you. But for me personally, I would stick with some of the lower trim levels here. But you do have the nice leather wrap steering wheel. The buttons are still laid out nicely, even if they are kind of plasticky here. They're very easy to use. Hyundai, Genesis, Kia, they all do a great job with steering wheels. They are some of the most intuitive, some of the easiest to use steering wheels when it comes to just the functions that you use all the time with your driver's assist features. You have a custom button, your volume, controlling your infotainment, all of that. You also have your drive mode nice and easily available right here on the steering wheel, as well as your four-wheel drive lock. Got the gear shift out of the way up here to clear space down here in the middle for other stuff. There is a start button for the people that want to start a war down in the comments on whether or not you need a start button, but this one does have a start button, and I appreciate having that. Up here in the gauge cluster, this whole thing, this whole tacked on gauge cluster infotainment system here is going to be standard. There aren't different levels or anything like that with the different trims. So you get the 12.3 inch and the 12.3 inch. The gauge cluster here, they kept very simple and very clean. You can watch a few different pieces of information here in the cluster, as well as, of course, you get your charge and how much range you have left, which has been pretty solid in terms of accuracy. That will, of course, tell you how long you have when you're charging as well. You can look at your tire pressure, you can look at your range, you can look at your trip information, as well as some of your driver's assist features. The heads-up display here is you can only get that in the GT trim. So I wish that was available in the lower trim levels. That is the one piece of information here. I really just wish it would be very nice to have that in the lower trims. But that has driver's assist features. It has your speed limit. It has all your highway drive assist stuff that's going on when you're driving, with little cubes going around to show you, where everyone is around you. We'll talk about that a little bit more during the drive, but that is really the only piece of information in here that's only on the GT line. You have this quick access thing here for your HVAC, but you also have HVAC buttons down here. So I'm glad they kept some physical controls, as well as just making it always available. Through here, you have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay are both wireless. This is the first Hyundai Kia Genesis product I've been in that had those both wireless. So really glad to see that they've updated that. That's going to be standard, and you have a wireless charger down here as well. Love that combo. You can adjust your seats through here. You can check the weather. You've got nav through here, standard. But of course, I'm going to end up using Android Auto most of the time anyway. You can adjust the screen layout. Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they do a really good job with the infotainment, making it easy to use. This is the latest system, and it's only gotten better. Nice, clear, easy to use. Everything's labeled very well, and you can adjust things, move things around, and it's nice and quick. Passenger talk here, if you want to talk to the people in the back, makes it a little bit easier to talk to them through the speakers here. There's a quiet mode if your kids are in the back sleeping or reading or whatever it is. You can shut off those speakers. We've got the digital mirror here in the upper specs. That one, as well as the heads-up display. I do wish this was available on other trim levels. It's available only in the top 2 trim levels here. But the digital mirror is great, especially when the car is full and it's tougher to see out the back. Buttons across here, I just completely avoid using because I do not like them. this is one of my least favorite things in automotive. They did this in the Aria as well, the Nissan Aria, and I just avoid using this because it doesn't feel natural. It feels very awkward to press here, and I have all the controls up here anyway. I just have avoided using that. You do have some USB-Cs down here. You got a 12 volt down there, lots of space down there. You got cup holders, and you can cover the space up. You can open these up if you want to open up the cup holders as well. And these seats themselves are super comfortable here. You can adjust the bolsters. They're 10-way power adjustable. This one, being the top spec, even has the relaxation mode. So if you're charging, you're sitting at a charger and you have to wait half an hour or whatever, you just pop up the leg rest here and put this thing back into relaxation mode, and you can take a little nap if you want. This one also has the ergo motion seats. Those are only available here in the top spec. It's sort of massage-ish. It'll just sort of keep you a little bit limber if you're on a long road trip. But if you're in the land trim, then you're going to get just the power adjustable, 10-way power adjustable with the lumbar support. You can even adjust the bolsters here. I love being able to adjust the bolsters. And then in the lower trim levels, you're going to get 8-way power adjustability. So no bolster adjustability, but you still do get the lumbar support. And we got these mesh headrests here that are very, very comfortable. Nice and breathable as well. These are also memory. These have memory settings, and they are heated and ventilated standard. We've got a heated steering wheel as well, accessible right here on the door. A couple of buttons for opening the front, opening the trunk, traction control. You can open the charger from in here if you want. And we got the stainless steel pedals down here that are labeled in case you're not sure which one is go and which one is stop. The stainless pedals are only if you are in this GT trim level. So generally speaking here, nice interior, lots of features, lots of USBs, lots of everything is very easily accessible. The ergonomics of this is great. The seats are great. Usability, the UX of everything is great. It's just some of the material choices here I do have some issues with at this price point. I do think at this price point they should have made it a little bit nicer, but honestly, I would just go with one of the lower specs, one of the lower trim levels if it were me. As always, I've been driving this car around for the last week, doing the actual daily commute, taking my kids around and dropping them off at school, going to work. This is not, YouTube's not paying my bills, so I am actually doing real things you would do in this car. And it has been a solid car for taking kids around. It has been a solid car for what the purpose of this thing is. It's a great commuter. The range here actually is one of either conservative or more accurate than a lot of the other cars I've been, because usually by this point in the week, by the end of the week, I am starting to have some range anxiety. I don't have a lot of range left, whereas this one here, I have pretty close to the same range as I started with at the beginning of the week, and I'm only using a level 1 charger here. So I can actually get by on my 25-mile commute each way with a level 1 charger, which is pretty surprising. If you have a shorter commute, you should be fine. If you have a little bit longer commute, then maybe you'll have to find a fast charger every once in a while. But I've been surprised at how good the range on this thing is. Now, aside from that, it is very smooth to drive. EVs are always very smooth. Once you start getting into the roads with a little bit more imperfections, it does get a little bumpier than a lot of the other EVs I've been in, I guess. Once you get to, some imperfect roads, but for like the highway and for the regular roads that are paved nicely, it is very, very smooth. And it's nowhere near like unbearable or anything for the rougher roads. It's just, if you compare it to the other EVs on the market, then it could be a little bit smoother. Of the noise in here with EVs, a lot of times the noise is more apparent, and that's true in this case as well. When you get on the highway, they did a good job for the most part of blocking out the sounds here, but when you get up to the higher speeds, if you're going 70, 75, maybe a little bit more, then you'll start to get a little bit more of that wind. It can get pretty harsh. A couple of times I've had like some wind buffeting I haven't found any consistency with that. It's only happened twice, so that was a little bit odd and a little bit uncomfortable. So that one's a strange one, but 99% of the time that has not been an issue. But other things this thing does so well for the daily commute is the throttle mapping here, and I'm gonna call it throttle, but even though it's not really throttle, but it's one of the best, if not the best, of the EVs I've been in terms of just smooth, comfortable acceleration. Like, even when it accelerates quickly, it accelerates in a smooth way that doesn't make you sick. Like, EVs are the only way I've made myself car sick while driving, because there are some that will just react right away, even in normal mode, and it's just tougher to modulate that throttle. Whereas this one is very smooth, whether you're in eco or normal. It's very smooth. It still gets you there quickly, but it's a more comfortable experience than a lot of the other EVs I've been in, if not every other EV that I've been in. If you want it to be extra quick, you can pop it into sport mode, but I've been in normal mode most of the time, and it's been great. And the same goes for the regenerative braking. You can do the one pedal drive thing, and as always, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they give you paddles right here on the steering wheel, whether you want it to be more aggressive, less aggressive on the regen braking. And then there's also a setting inside the infotainment here if you want it to react more quickly or less quickly in terms of that regen braking. So they really let you customize the experience here. So if you're new to EVs, you're trying to get used to that one pedal driving, then it should be nice and easy. But if you're a pro at it, then you set it up to the max and get that max regen. And it's really just, it's very well done in terms of the acceleration and in terms of the regen braking. They did a great job with that. Other things that are going to help your daily drive or your long trips as well are going to be the highway drive assist, as well as the smart cruise with stop and go, which Hyundai and Kia and Genesis do one of the best in terms of this system. So it's going to keep you centered in your lane. It's going to keep your distance behind the person in front of you. It also kind of monitors everyone around you. You get these little cubes in your gauge cluster, or if you have the heads-up display, the cubes will show there as well, or it'll show you sort of everyone around you. When I first saw that system, it was a little bit distracting. I've kind of gotten used to it, so now it's a little more helpful than it is distracting. You do get used to that after a while. And so that's nice to know, like, where everyone is. It's great at pointing out your blind spot, whether somebody's in your blind spot, through here as well as through the heads-up display there. We also have the front and rear parking sensors, as I mentioned, front collision avoidance here, rear collision avoidance, blind spot collision avoidance, all these very helpful systems that don't get in the way, but they are very helpful in the case of an emergency. The digital mirror here I mentioned is a great touch, especially in a big 3-row like this, where the window is so far back, or you got all these seats in the middle, especially if you had the bench across. If you had somebody sitting in the middle, it'd be really hard to see out the back. So really nice to have that. But again, that is only in the upper specs. I wish it were at least an option on the lower specs, but glad to see that here. You've got active sound design going on. That's kind of an interesting one here. So if you want it to make some noise when you hit the throttle, then it will, you can set it, you can say whether you want it to make noise just on small changes or just on medium or large changes, or just don't make noise at all. It's sort of like a synthetic engine noise. Not quite like an engine noise, but sort of kind of like a synthetic engine noise. If you're into it, if you want something to help sort of cover up some of the ambient noise, then that's an option there. Gauge cluster here will show you what's in your blind spot when you hit the turn signal. Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they've been doing this for a while in the upper trim levels. Again, it's only available in the upper trim levels here, unfortunately. I know Tesla does that, and they do it through the infotainment system. Honda did it at one point through the infotainment system. It's much better having it through here, through the gauge cluster, because you don't have to take your eyes so far off the road. You just do a little peek down and you can see. Of course, you do still have the mirrors. The blind spot here isn't too bad. but it's nice and helpful having that extra camera. Power here is going to come from the rear wheels primarily. Most of the time it's just the rear wheels. I love that I can put a nerd out over which wheels are driving the system down here, but it's most of the time it's going to be rear wheels. It'll get the front wheels involved sort of as needed. If you're in inclement weather, if it starts to feel a little bit of slip somewhere, then it will get those involved as needed. But I love that a lot of these EVs are going back to rear drive. You know, a lot of cars used to be rear drive, and then it just was easier, it was simpler to put the front wheels as the drive wheels, just because the engine's up front and it's a lot easier to connect to the front axle. Whereas here with an EV, it doesn't really matter. You can sort of pick and choose. So I'm glad they're going with the back wheels. Helps a lot with the maneuverability, as well as the low center of gravity here really helps it handle a little bit better. I'm not going to be tracking this thing, but it does help it handle a little bit better. And you know, I guess you could track it. It's just very fast. It has way more power than you'd ever need. I don't understand why this thing would ever need this much power. I think I would be totally happy with the one that has 215 horsepower. The driving experience overall, other than the like really rough roads and maybe the one or two times I had that weird wind buffeting issue, not sure what that was about, but the rest of the time here, it's just been such an easy car to drive, so smooth, so nice to be here, such a nice place to be in terms of the driving experience. Driver assist features are excellent. It really is a great car to drive. And the range estimates here, you know, everything about the driving experience has been very, very good. At the end of the day here, we have a very well executed EV crossover for families. This thing would be wonderful to live with full time. The only real issues I have are some of the material choices on the inside at this price point. But again, I would just go down to one of the lower price points. It's also hard to swallow the price of new EVs in general. So it would be a lot easier to say I would pick it up on the used market for a lot cheaper. Maybe I would go for a lease. Honestly, a lease is probably the way to go. I would look out for some very good lease deals here coming up in 2024 and 2025, especially once that tax credit hits, once these are starting to be built fully in the US. But generally speaking, this has been an excellent EV experience. Never have to go to the gas station anymore. The range is plenty for a family and the charging is very, very quick. No issues at all with that. If you're looking for an EV family crossover, I would absolutely check one of these out.